All right, Lame, welcome to. First of all, is that how you pronounce your name? Am I saying it right?
Yep, you're saying it
Lame.
perfectly right,
Lame.
brother.
Okay, got it.
So,
All right, Lame, officially welcome to the Wealth Juice Podcast. I appreciate you taking the time today, man. This is funny. I sometimes reach out to people that I see on Instagram that are just like in our space that look like they're killing it. I love your page. I love your content. So I appreciate you taking the time. We're gonna have some fun today.
absolutely, Corey. Thanks for having me, brother. And I know what it takes to build community and to continue to give value. And I don't think people realize that hustle unless you've done it yourself. So, hats off to you. Kudos. I'm excited to be here and share my story and hopefully bring value to your audience.
Well,
So,
I already know you will, man. And yeah, it is a 24/7 game, right? Trying to build a community of people that you know, like, and trust, and that's reciprocated. And it's become such a passion of mine. And I know you have some of that in your story as well. But before we get to all that good stuff, I just want people to know who you are. So let's take this back a little bit, maybe pre-real estate. Just tell me about you, maybe about your upbringing and how entrepreneurship and real estate like became such a big focus for you.
yeah, absolutely. So, first and foremost, I like to think myself as I think the two primary roles that are the most valuable and important to me are my wife, being a husband, and then being a father to my four kids. So, been married 10 years. My wife was the best business decision I'd ever made. I always tell people like, hey, look me up on Instagram, look at my family picture, because once you see a picture of my wife, you'll realize how good of a salesman I am. The best salesmen are often the ones that marry hella up, and I feel like I did. And so, I've been married 10 years. I got four kids. Family has always been an important piece of my life because I'm by heritage, I'm Polynesian, I'm Tongan. A lot of people don't know what that is. If you know what Samoa is or Hawaii, we're basically one of the other islands in the Pacific Triangle. And I'm close to the islands because my grandparents were immigrants, and so I always share that origin story mostly because I don't think people realize when your grandparents are that close to being immigrants, you really have a lot of you have a lot of lessons and you hold a lot of identity with like that journey because there's very few people that understand what it was like to travel to another land. You don't know the language. You have $0 to your name. In fact, you have net negative dollars to your name, and you build a life here. To me, that is the greatest form of entrepreneurship. And it's sad that we live in a world today where people are demonizing like the American dream because from where I come from, it very much is a real thing. And my family moved over here for a specific reason, and that was to build a life here in America. And so that's kind of who I am in a nutshell. I hold close to me where I come from, and because of that, it's led me to really pursue relentlessly the American dream, which I feel blessed to take part of today. So
Yeah, man, we don't talk about this too often. But I guess at some lineage in my history, my family was immigrants too, right? We kind of
yeah,
all are at some
yeah,
level in America, but maybe not as like in the most recent generations as you. And I find it fascinating that like we live in the best time ever, in my opinion, the best time ever because now the hard work of what your ancestors did has been done. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And that is I think people overlook that. It's like growing up in the 1920s or 30s and like trying to get to America, or maybe it's a little bit after that, or dealing with World War I and then World War II. And like, obviously there are a ton of problems. We can talk about problems. I like to talk more about the good in things now. And I just think like, man, this was the path was paved. So like you have a duty and responsibility to like take that to the next level. And you did, man. So let's talk through this story a little bit. So you have this strong lineage, like you want to make your family proud. I think it's awesome. What did you do exactly to start that? And it seems like you've done it. When you said been married for 10 years, I'm like, you look like you're 28. So I don't, maybe 35. I don't know how old you are. So like,
yeah.
tell me about like the inception story, if you will.
Yeah. So I'm 33.
Okay.
I got married really young. When I got
Yeah.
married, when we got engaged, my wife is 19, and when we got married, she was 20.
Okay.
And a lot of people, laugh at that, and a lot of people are surprised that I have so many kids at so young, right? Because we started a family early. But I'll tell you what, that has probably been like contrary to normal American society of getting married in your mid 30s and waiting to have kids. I did it the opposite. And frankly, that was one of the best business decisions I ever could have made. When your brain kind of solves that portion of like, who am I going to marry? Who's going to be my companion? And you make a decision and you go all in on that one decision. You have so much more time. I can honestly say that like one of my superpowers in building the business and finding out my career path and getting ahead early was just because I wasn't wasting time partying on the weekends, trying to find a girl, dating, courting. Like there's so much time that goes into that, and time is money. And being able to be wed early, that helped me get started and running really early, and really not so much in real estate specifically, but just in figuring out what the journey was. Because early on, and I'll kind of take a few steps back. My dad is actually one of the very first Polynesian physicians to get their medical degree from a university here in America. And so I come from a lineage where my dad pursued the American dream by way of education. He now makes he makes about $800,000 a year as a psychiatrist that practices in Hawaii. So he's very successful. And that was kind of what I saw and recognized as the American dream. When I started early on, I wanted to pursue that, which was medicine. And so I started at one point back in the day when I got married. I was a chemistry major with a minor in business, and I was going through the normal things because I wanted to become a physician. I remember I took my first prereq in business, and that led me down a mental loophole, like a mental black hole. I was just like, okay, I thought I was all about chemistry, was all about science, and now I'm learning about this business. And honestly, it was like a business or org class. It wasn't even like a tactical business strategy class. It was like business organizational behavior. And I was so fascinated by it to where that was really what opened up my eyes to like, maybe there's more to career and more to like another side of this world that I should start looking into. So that led me to actually start my first sales job, which originally was over the phones. And I was selling security systems to over the phone with a company called Vivint. And I kept hearing about the top salesmen in this industry are the ones that go door to door and sell Vivint door to door. And so I was on the phones. I was one of their top performers on the phones. But then I heard about all this commotion of there's these other guys that they knock door to door and they make stupid money, right? Stupid money, as they put it. And that's really what got me to then eventually put medicine on pause and pursue a career in sales. And that was the start. What I didn't realize was the start of my entrepreneurial journey, right? And mind you, this is still years before I actually jumped into real estate. But I go over this every time in my story because I think it's valuable. Because people often ask, Lama, how did you scale a 9-figure portfolio in 6 years? My response to them is I didn't. I did it in 10, right? Because there's so many lessons and so many things in your journey right now that are going to play significant roles of skills that you develop that will serve you a lot better later. You just don't know it, right? And at the time, it was me putting medicine on pause and being like, look, I can always come back to this. I got 1 year left. I can always come back, take the MCAT. Like credits have 10-year lifespan, so I have time to come back if I need to. And I'm going to pursue medicine. So I stopped doing the phone sales, went out to do door to door, and I did door to door for about 5 years. But that was probably where I developed some of the best skills that have served me extremely well to transition to real estate, which was in door to door, which was all the soft skills of what it takes. There's very few professions, Corey, where you can knock on a door, like the homeowner comes out, they're pissed, they hate you, like they're just irate, and 30 minutes later, I'm walking out their front door, cold Coke in hand, signed PSA, and that gentleman that was yelling at me 30 minutes ago wants me to marry his daughter, right? What happens in that time frame is very, very, very high-level communication skills, negotiation skills, EQ skills that are developed when you do that job, when you do a job like door-to-door, right? And I got very good at it. I made multiple 6 figures. But that was really, even though I was a 1099, like I was a salesman, to me, that was the start of what is Elk Ridge Investments today because of all the things that I developed. So that was like the early stages of what developed into these stages of entrepreneurship, if you will. So.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. I also think that it is so hard to see, the outside of the forest when you're in the forest. And that's kind of what you're talking about. Like, I don't know where this is going to take me. Yep. And I have a lot to unpack here because I imagine, and I've heard this a number of times, if my dad's a physician, he's probably not like, yeah, go be a salesman, right? Like, I don't know if that was if that was a point of contention, but I know a
Yeah.
lot of physicians who are like, don't be a salesman. That's a shitty
They're
job.
risk
Did that
adverse.
happen? Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny. The biggest, it's what's ironic is like probably the biggest like pushback actually came from my father-in-law, who I had a very good relationship with, who was an entrepreneur, which is interesting enough, right? But I kind of got it on both sides, probably more so from my father-in-law. But what I can say about my dad was he's always been extremely supportive. And so, I definitely could read between the lines when I told him, hey, I'm dropping out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the time, it's them just being worried about what if it doesn't work out? What's going to happen? They want me to not suffer, but obviously things are a lot different now. And it's funny because every time I talk to my dad about it, he's like, man, that was the best bullet you ever dodged, was becoming a physician. He's like, you would
Yeah.
have taken a huge pay cut. I'm like, I sure would have,
Yeah. And it's hard to see that as a parent too. Like,
Yeah,
I'm not a parent
yeah,
yet. I'm doing this at a later stage in my life. I'm 34. I'm doing this at a way later stage than you are. I just got engaged and we're getting married, and those times are coming. I'm not a parent, so I don't know what that's like. But I imagine it's like I just want to protect my kids. I want them to be happy and healthy and have a better life than I did. So kudos to your dad for letting you be you and explore that. I
yeah,
think that's incredible. I want to get into how the real estate started. Like,
yeah.
you're in the door-to-door sales. You learned all these skills. We can talk about the skill set that you've learned. How did you transition from door-to-door to real estate? Because I talked to a number of people that actually have done this. This is like a kind of one path that people will go. Sometimes it's, tech sales or healthcare. They get into real estate. I know that. And then there's also like the door-to-door getting into real estate. It's just like bigger commission checks, that type of thing. Like, what drove you? How the bus steer in that direction?
Yeah, great question. So kind of continuing off where we left off on the story, right? In the timeline. I quit college. My goal when I left college was just to get proof of concept, right? And the first time I went all in, the first year I went all in on that sales job, I made 200 grand. And at the time, that was a lot of money for that time period, because I think the year I did that, I was like 26, I think 25, 26. So 200 grand, like just dropped out of college. I was like, this is the best decision ever. And that was also the year that I kind of told my dad, and he was like, oh yeah, like don't go back to school. He's like, because like by the time I had finished, I would, the amount of money I could make relative to the debt I would have to go in, like after having had a year like that, it was a no brainer, right? When you just
Yep.
do the math, right? And so I did, and it's funny because I think the most dangerous amount of money that anybody can make in nowadays is 200 to 300 grand, and it's dangerous because it's enough money to feel good. It's enough money. You're living. You're not in poverty. You have, for the most part, things that you want, but it's also enough money to be extremely risk adverse. It gets you into this position where you're deathly afraid to live underneath that means, right? And to risk it, right? And I see it a lot in tech sales, like guys that are making 200 to 300 grand. It is oftentimes the most dangerous amount of money, because that is where dreams and big money dies, because you get comfortable, right? And it just becomes a very comfortable life. But then, if you're an entrepreneur and you push yourself, like naturally you start to have these inklings of like, man, I know I am worth more than this. I hear people making millions of dollars. Why can't I? Right. And that's what it was for me. I was making multiple sixes. I was happy. I was young, but I was like, man, there has to be more. And, I talk about my father in law. I was in New Mexico at the time when this happened. I was running my door to door team. We were having one of our best years that we've ever had. And I remember my wife getting this call from her mother. And I remember it like it was yesterday, because I was sitting there. I was with my wife Taylor and my brother-in-law Jake, who's my wife's little brother. He was across the room in the kitchen. And I remember my wife's mom calls. She picks up the phone and she just goes pale white. And I remember just thinking something happened. And it's the first time I'd seen my wife just get that ghostly white. She looks over to my brother and she just starts shaking her head. Her dad died. and it was totally unexpected. Had a heart attack. This is a man that I had a very close relationship with, and he died. It was extremely tragic. We had to pick up. I was in the middle of a summer, right? Because we were doing summer sales. I was running my team. We had to pick up our team. We had to drive back 9 hours with all of my kids to go to the funeral. We were there for about 10 days. And then after the 10th day, I had to go back to New Mexico, and I had to essentially like finish out the summer. And it was in that moment, right, in this timeline, in this moment of time, I realized my time was not my own, right? Like I had to report back to this team, to this organization, to this company that needed me to hit KPIs to be able to live, right? And that was the moment that changed everything for me, right? And that's what eventually pushed me into real estate. Now, what's interesting about this timeline, right, is when I quit, I really didn't have like a plan, nor did I have nearly enough money to do so. Like I didn't have like a stash away of, $500,000 to be able to go start a business, nor did I have a plan of action. I just knew that I needed to burn the boat, and I call it the spirit, call it, I like to think that, God is in the details, but call it whatever you want, right? I just knew I needed to make a change to be able to see different results in my life. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and hoping for different results, right? Mm-hmm. So it was that moment that I was just like, hey, I'm never doing this again. I'm going to jump. And at the time, I really just looked at what am I good at? What do I have? And for the last few years, I had one Airbnb that I used to live in. And because I didn't want to move the furniture, I was too lazy to move furniture, it became an Airbnb. And I'd been running that for 2 years. And I looked at everything and I was like, hey, I kind of know how to do Airbnbs. Let's step into it. And that was the beginning of my journey, right? It was just kind of that mental journey getting into it. So
yeah, this is fascinating because you're right. It's funny, the $100,000 mark used to be the number that you're talking about, which is a whole nother dollar debasement problem that we can get into in another episode. But the fact is that the six figures, 100K, used to be that comfortable spot, and now it's 200 to 300. So if that's not telling you something on what people should be focused on, again, topic for another day. But you were making that or more. It's what it sounds like, and it's unbelievable when something like that happens to you, something that tragic, that it shifts you into a new mode of like, even though I'm making X amount, I still have to report to somebody. And for me, that kind of happened a little bit too. I was making somewhere in that 100 to 200 range. And I left my job, my full-time job, to pursue real estate, building a community, being an agent full time, because I just said, this is my ultimate control of my time. And this past year, I've taken a hit on active income because of that decision, So to be able to see what's next, one Airbnb, I don't care about the revenue. You're not making, you're not making what you were making at this job. So now my thing is like, all right, so how did that lead you? You've kind of mentioned this 9-figure portfolio. How did that lead you to this path? Was it flipping? Was it wholesaling? What was the thing? What was the active income that you started to make that allowed you to fuel it into these investments?
Yeah. And that's oftentimes the first problem that needs to be solved when making a jump like that, right? And which is, how do I live? How do I create enough income to at least survive while I build? And what it was for me was actually Airbnb arbitrage.
Arbitrage, got it.
And so, and this is around 2018, 2019, right? So there's definitely luck involved in this. And I think the luckier you are is the harder and more risks you take, right? And I kind of burnt the bridge, decided to get into arbitrage. For those that don't know what arbitrage is I was basically going out and I was signing leases with landlords, and I did it differently. I had everything above board. There's some arbitrage gurus that'll teach you, hey, don't let them know that you're going to be renting it out. Just pretend like you're going to live in it. No, I did it and this is where the soft skills of sales came into play. It really wasn't that difficult for me to find a landlord, communicate to them exactly the numbers, what I was looking to do speculatively, and how I was going to pay the rent, and then sign that lease and then furnish it with my own money and then Airbnb it and take the difference of after rent and OPEX on the property. And that's how I started. And so I started from 0 to 20 was all arbitrage. I just built this entire portfolio. And what's crazy is like I built back 6 figures of cash flow like within honestly like 6 months. It really wasn't that difficult. And this is I have to say this because I feel like it's so in line with like the entrepreneurship journey. That was one of the first things that I realized that my skill sets of being a salesman, a high level 6 figure entrepreneur salesman, like that was the first time I realized that those skill sets served me so much more better, so much more valuable at market, like doing something else, right?
Yeah.
And that's to say that sometimes we don't realize that what we're good at in our job and the skills we've developed, they're going to serve you so much better in another capacity. And that's what I learned very quickly in arbitrage. It was very easy for me to find landlords, to find and negotiate like furniture deals, wholesale deals, like with companies or on Facebook Marketplace, to be able to get into this asset that I didn't own, but I could create cash flow with very little money, right? And that's what I did. And the first few I did it with 0% interest cards. I just like leveraging debt. I had 18 months to be able to buy this furniture on a credit card, and if I could pay it off in 18 months, it was free money, right? I didn't have to pay interest on it. And that's how I started, right? I just started doing that and just hustling and grinding, and that's where it went. So, yeah.
I mean, I think that real estate investors get it confused sometimes when they talk about like a lot of people. So for me, I'm a long-term buy and hold investor. We buy 5 to 30 unit value add multifamily in the Northeast. I'm in Philadelphia, but we're buying them in Vermont and New Hampshire. And our thing is that I know that those projects are not going to pay me true dividends for 5 to 7 years. Every time I start one, it's 5 to 7 years. I'll get cash flow. Don't get me wrong. It's great. It'll start to pay the bills, all that. But I know it's a 5 to 7 year plan. But people forget the active side of things. Like, okay, you're not going to just buy 10 rentals and live off the income. You could, but it's extremely hard to do today in 2025, way harder than it was in 2013 or whatever it is. So you created this ecosystem where you're able to get the active income, and then you started the investment company, it sounds like. So what are you focused on today? Like what's your company look like? I know you have a lot of the Airbnb.
Because really the evolution of arbitrage into investments kind of went like this, right? We started in arbitrage. I knew I needed to scale even quicker. So starting in arbitrage allowed me to actually jump into management. And management is a lot better because it's all bottom line. At that point, you're just essentially exchanging your services for capital, right? And so, because arbitrage, I had to find money. I had to go get a 0% interest card. When I managed contracts, it was really just all in the black if you could manage it well. So that's really what started Elk Ridge Management officially. Was I scaled then. When we went to 20, it was a lot easier for me to leverage that portfolio for credibility. To then scale at scale, we were at like 120 management contracts. And so I started out in the management space, which is important to know because I started out in operations, right? When I got into management, I got really obsessed over how to manage and maximize a property that I didn't own, right? I was just managing it we were sharing, and I was taking a management fee. I was paying them and paying the owner. And so we started to essentially own every piece of that. So I went and essentially built an in-house cleaning team. I went and built a handyman team. So today, everything outside of licensed contracting work, HVAC, plumbing, and electrical, is under our umbrella. So anybody that touches an Airbnb, whether it's a cleaner, a handyman, a designer, even in acquiring and finding and buying that, is all under my umbrella now, because when I was in operations, that was what I could do to essentially get and maximize the opportunity. Now, I started to see the writing on the wall because COVID hit. People were starting to see interest rates. Fear were starting to enter the market. That's when a lot of people started to make decisions of pulling out of Airbnb. And that is the most miserable thing on earth. This is like this level 2 lesson of entrepreneurship. Level 1, I don't control my own time. I need to build something. Level 2 is I'm leveraged in a niche where somebody else is making the decision based on my income. And that's what it was in the management space. I got completely hosed by all these owners that just sold or wanted to get out of the Airbnb space, and there's nothing I could do about it, right?
Yep.
And that is where Elkridge Investments was born, right? Because then that was the third level of like, hey, I need to control the asset now. And that's when we jumped into the acquisition space. And so we opened up an acquisition arm. We already had all the management pieces of how to make it work. And so buying and owning the asset was really the only other change that we needed to make. And we did that, figured out capital markets, focused on the tax side of things. And fast forward to today, we now have over 300 in our portfolio. We own that portfolio, and it's an in-house operation now, and that's kind of where it stands today.
Yeah,
so.
it grew. It grew so fast for you too, and I think for people that didn't see it, it took that 10+ years, but like now hearing the story, it's like, wow, this really exploded. But you focus on the short-term rental loophole, and I want people to hear what that is from your mouth, not mine. Talk to me about what you focus on now, because you're right. A lot of the real estate game, not just short-term rentals, but real estate is so. People don't even understand the tax side of things. Like it's a foreign thing. They think about cash flow. Like I can't even tell you how much money in my world, how much it was for me in taxes in 2024 and now 2025. I'm like, man, I'm buying real estate for taxes. I'm not buying it for cash flow. So talk to me about the short-term rental loophole and what you do.
See, and you're exactly right. Like people that make money, they understand that some of the highest and most valuable use of real estate isn't the cash flow. That's what all of Instagram will tell you. It's actually what you keep. Yeah. It's the tax mitigation side. Because your the most expensive expense you'll ever have in any business is always going to be taxes, right? And real estate is one of those where the government incentivizes us to do so that we can get tax breaks. When we opened up the capital market side, when we opened up the acquisition side, I bought the first few doors with my own cash. I had 300 grand. I think that stretched to about 3 doors. And then I was like, okay, like my money is going to only go so far. I got to figure out a way to scale. So then we started to open up capital markets. Okay. And this is where things got interesting, because initially when I started to raise money for this, I was positioning this offer as if it were a good alternative investment for cash flow. So like that was the pitch, right? It's like, Corey, come into this with me. You're going to get incredible cash flow. This is an Airbnb. It's asset backed, yada, yada, yada. When we started to do that, we started to really see people come in for different reasons. So we started to hone in on why is somebody buying a short-term rental with us? And what we found was that the predominant glowing reason was taxes. And therein is the short-term rental tax loophole, which is one of the few exceptions where a normal person that isn't in real estate every day can take depreciation, which is basically that's just a coupon against your active income, against what you actually have to pay in taxes, your taxable income. A normal person can take depreciation against their ordinary or active income by way of one of the very few tax loopholes, and short-term rentals is one of them. And so in layman's terms, if somebody is a physician, for example, let's take my dad, for example, the only way he can take depreciation or tax benefit from real estate is he has to do 750 hours and he has to have it be his primary occupation, right? Which him being a physician, that's impossible,
yep.
Right? He'd have to essentially go part-time as being a doctor and go full-time into real estate. It doesn't work. With the short-term rental, there's an exception in the law, in the IRS code, that all you have to do is if you have a short-term rental, you just have to participate in it 100 hours annually. And that's it, right? And that is the loophole. And so that's what allows a normal person to be able to take significant tax benefits from real estate. And that's what we've built our entire ecosystem around. So now, and that's why your CPA oftentimes, without people knowing exactly why, that's why CPAs will tell high income earners, go buy a short-term rental, right? Is because of this short-term rental tax loophole. Now, a lot of people oftentimes will buy a short-term rental, and just because of the tax benefits, they don't even care if it cash flows, right? That's like a common practice in short-term rentals is people will buy it for tax mitigation, and they don't even care if they're eating, if they're eating bricks every month, if it's a liability, because at the end of the day, they got an asset and they got a huge discount on their taxes, right? we as a company have built an entire infrastructure around not only taking advantage of that, but also buying and meticulously operating a property that is profitable, right? There's, for those listening that have done this, like, there's a better way. There is another way to be able to buy it and to operate it so that it's not just liability. It saves you on taxes, but also cash flows. And that's what we do really, really well.
So a couple questions based on that is I know you're in Utah. Are your properties all that you're buying in your area in Utah or like surrounding areas? And then the second thing is, so we buy multifamily, like I said, 5 to 30 units. And what ends up happening is we run syndications. So partners come in, they invest with us, but it makes sense in my brain. It's like, well, okay, there's a 20 unit. We have 5 to 8 investors that are taking down the 20 unit. Is it working in reverse for you where you have a large property that's an asset like a 10 bedroom or something that people are going to use as an Airbnb? And then do people have fractional interest in that property? Or is it like, do you have 6 investors that are buying this one property that buy it with you? How does it work? Like, what's the model?
Really good question. So I'll answer the first question. First one is we are in 15 states and it's micro locations. So we're not just in Utah. Really, the game of Airbnb is knowing where and what avatar you're serving. And so we do have specific locations that do well that are all over the country. And we understand that because we understand the demand based on Airbnb data, right? Second question is so because of the way that it's structured with our deals, it's not fractionalized at all. So you get one property per capital partner that we work with.
Got it.
And now the type of property does matter, right? But in the capital market side, we're not fractionalizing it at all. And a lot of that is because how we acquire. And this is important to know because this is also for any of you that are wanting to get in it. Here's the second hack that we do at scale that helps us take advantage of this loophole. We buy creative almost exclusively. And so a lot of my deals are either sub to or seller financed. And what that is basically just an alternative way of going and getting a bank loan. I can buy it just really person to person, right? Consumer to consumer, right? We just closed on a seller finance note. This gentleman owned a property. It was a 6-bedroom property, 4-bath, owned it free and clear. It was $1 million property. Rather than going and getting a note, he put his entire retirement into this one house, this $1 million house. Instead of cashing out on that, getting a huge tax liability, paying capital gains, yada, 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 I gave him 10% down, gave him $100,000, say, hey, take this, start off your retirement life. And now we created a note where I pay him monthly instead of the bank, and he's making 4%, right? So now he's extending the life of his retirement plan by way of this asset through a seller finance note. And I get an incredible note. I just closed on this deal and it's 4% when interest rates are 7 right now, right? And 20% down. So now I can create a lot more leverage with less money in a property that is going to be used as a high functioning short-term rental. And that's essentially our model.
Got it. It makes perfect sense. What do you say to people that say Airbnb is dead?
That just tells me a lot as to, how much, or I should say how little you know about the industry, right? Because everybody that's saying that, if you were to put a microscope on their ops, it's the people that jumped into it during COVID because they wanted full-time Airbnb income on a part-time job, right? Just like anything else, right? You and me both know this in real estate. The idea of passive income is the biggest farce in freaking real estate ever. There's nothing passive about it. And people got so comfortable with throwing, frankly, a bet on bricks up on Airbnb and it making money because it did. It did for 24 months, right? But just like anything else good, that's not sustainable. The market does not sustain that. And so now people are calling it dead, and it's just because of now they're not making what they used to on a part-time job. You know what I mean? Like, and that's why it's like I always laugh at people like that because I'm like, how many do you have? How all in did you go in? What do you know? Do you have SEOs? Do you know the algorithm? Like, what is your list of like where you're getting your furniture, all the whole stuff? Like, there's just so much to it that I laugh constantly when people are like, Airbnb's dead. It's like, well, it's dead for you. It's like, it's dead for you. Those of us that know how to play the game, we're making plenty of money.
It's also better for you when people say that, in my opinion. 100%. Like that's what you want, because you want to weed out the weak competition, and then you want to be able to thrive. And I love Airbnb. I have a one property that's a short-term rental in Tampa, Florida, that I just get to visit as a lifestyle play. And like I sent my family there, it does make money, but I'm in it for the long haul with that. And then we own a percentage of like a 43 unit in the Pocono Mountains in PA. That is very cyclical. In the winter and summer, it's great. In the fall and spring, you're kind of breaking even, but we're doing it for the tax reasons and the equity play and all that stuff. So I love Airbnb. I think if you're a super host and you can get guest favorite and you can create a true experience for somebody, I know everyone's like all in the hotel thing now, but like my thing is, if I'm going somewhere with me and my fiance, maybe the two of us, there's a chance I would stay in a hotel. If I'm going anywhere with 4 or more people, I want a place to myself, and Airbnb isn't going anywhere, in my opinion. And I'm sure you have opinions about that, but it sounds like your places that you're buying are more, I'm not saying like parties, but they're for bigger groups, right? Is that the case?
I will say, like, the case studies that we're seeing is like the bigger the better, right? The more amenities, the better. Like now on Airbnb, and Airbnb's algorithm will tell you everything once you log onto it. What are the first properties that you see? They're highly amenitized, they're highly unique, and they look like they look like a resort, right? And that is the game today, right? And you don't have to. You can get away with doing that like on a budget, but knowing how to play that game is incredibly important. But yes, like now,
I always say that to people. Yeah, people ask me oftentimes, because we teach people how to get in the real estate game. Now, sometimes that is your first deal as a short-term rental, but I always say to people, look, if you want to get into short-term rentals, do it, but you cannot do something like this. You cannot buy a one bed and try to put $25,000 down and go to IKEA and furnish it and then just toss up iPhone photos. You're going to get crushed. You're going to get crushed. Not to say that one beds don't work, but they have to be a unique front desk of a hotel 5-star experience. And that is how the game works. And think about you as a consumer. If you can go to a Marriott, which is a nice hotel, but not amazing, and have a good experience, your Airbnb can't be worse than that level of going to get to the front desk and getting hot towels. It has to be higher level than that, or they're just going to go to the Marriott. So, I mean, to me, I love Airbnb. I think it's not going anywhere. For people like you, it's probably getting even better now because of the people that have exited the space that thought that they were just going to throw up their grandmother's house. And I think that's like anything, man. That's competition in business. So.
Yeah. And really, the market's just matured. That's really what it is. People call it saturation. It's maturity, right? It's like gone are the days where you can just throw a bet on bricks and make money. Now you actually have to learn how to play the game. And by the way, like, it's still in its infancy, right? Like, there's still a lot of players that are looking. I will say Airbnb is what's changing the retail market, right? There is a fear that's valid, which is in 10 years from now, is it going to be a lot harder for a normal person to buy? That there's some truth to that, right? And that's because BlackRock, they just liquidated a 10-figure portfolio of office space. Where'd they redirect to? Boutique hotels and retail, right? And that's exactly what they're doing because everybody's seeing this market shift, right? And so really now's the time, in my opinion, to get in. But if you're going to get in, you got to jump in, And to your point, like, just understand how to play the game, because there's still people, students of mine, that are still making great money on their first deal. That's a single family home. You just have to know how to play it is all it is. So
where does that leave you with your business in terms of future goals? Like, where do you want your business to go in the next 1 to 3 years, or maybe even longer term? I mean, you tell me. I'm curious about where you see it going. You mentioned 9-figure portfolio. It sounds like, you have this real flow of helping people understand the short-term rental tax loophole. Is it just growing that business? Is it expanding to more states? What's the vision?
Well, and interesting enough, I feel like a lot of my vision actually changed and was inspired. I shouldn't say inspired, but also I guess I should say sustained by the Big Beautiful Bill, right? All politics aside, the Big Beautiful Bill was a huge win for real estate professionals, frankly, right? In the extension of 100% depreciation permanently. That's really where we kind of doubled down, is once that came out, and that solidified our market share in the space of being the short-term rental tax guys. Not that we do taxes, but that we help people attack their taxes through short-term rentals. And so my goal is, because even now it's still in its infancy, short-term rentals in itself is still in its infancy, and you can see it by way of it's not fully adopted into mainstream finance, such as banks. When you go into an underwriting, it's 50-50. It used to be very seldom, but now it's 50-50 of certain banks that will take Air DNA comps and use that as a viable means to get a DCR ratio, right? To get a DSCR loan, right? It used to be where you couldn't. They would require 2 years of actuals to then be able to use those numbers. Now there's certain banks that will actually take that. There's certain banks that are coming out with short-term rental loans, right? And that's just a little example of this adoption that's still taking place, to where I firmly believe, and I want to be cemented in this sector and in this niche. I want to be the go-to short-term rental tax guy when it all comes to say, because there's still CPAs that don't understand it. They think that the short-term rental loophole is qualifying people to be a real estate professional. There's still CPAs, licensed CPAs, that think that's it. That's not it, right? It's actually moving that short-term rental from a passive activity to an active. That's what you're doing. And so when you talk about vision, that's where I see our company going to, which to me is a market share of $1 trillion industry, which we know of as taxes. And to me, I want to have $1 billion rev share in that, which is what we're working towards.
So are you a CPA yourself, or do you partner with CPAs that you have like in the background on your team?
Really good question. And that's why I tell the story of how we fell upon it, right? Because I am not a CPA at all. And so we have an entire network of CPAs, wealth advisors, and which we use. And, and by the way, that's to give us some credibility. We almost exclusively work with CPAs. And so we're working with professionals in the space to serve their clients. We obviously work directly with people that have high tax liabilities, but for those that have skepticism about what we do in our business model, we almost now exclusively get 80% of our business through CPAs. Yep. They're recommending our services to other people because of how we do it and how we've structured it and all of the detail and everything that we've done to make sure that it's a valid option. So
very cool, man. I as we kind of wind down the show, I like to get a little bit more personal and just ask about, because you started it out this way, just with your family, having 4 kids and like trying to buy back your time. I'm curious about, this entrepreneurial journey. I've been like kind of this like quasi entrepreneur for like 7 years, starting the podcast, starting the social platform, buying real estate, but really having my full-time job as something to lean on. And in the past like 15 months, I'm like, now it's real. And I'm like, all right, like I'm looking down and my floor's gone. So that's fine. My ceiling is the atmosphere, right? But my floor's gone. So it's taken some struggle and some like trying to figure out how I fit into this market to see how I can win. And I want to ask you a question about that, like about your why and what keeps you going, because you can come on a podcast and you can share your story and people think it's roses and sunshine, and that's just not the reality. I'm curious about like what specifically is your why that allows you to press forward when things are not as peachy, I guess, as they look.
Yeah. So I'll get, you asked to get personal, so I'll get personal. I'll get a little vulnerable. Just recently, we sold off a piece of our portfolio that, for the first time, it gave me a check into the personal checkings account that was multiple sevens. It was my first big 7-figure check that didn't have to go back into the business. I could choose to do whatever I wanted with it, right? There's a series of conversations that you have with your loved ones when you know that's coming. And this is how it was for me. You have your list of wants, right? Like, we know this money's coming. What is everything that we want? And you start going down that list and you realize that, you start to like do the numbers and you realize, like, do I really want to spend that much money on this thing? Right. And then that wants kind of then gets watered down to, okay, well, what do we actually need from this? Right. And I've been blessed, and I'm sure many people are, your immediate needs are taken care of. Right. Like I have a house over my head. Like, we have cars, or, like, we don't have to worry about food. Like, there really isn't many needs. Right. And then you kind of shift to what is going to make me happy. Right. And as we progress down these lists, right, and I arrive to this small list of things that actually make me happy, what's ironic about that, Corey, is when I look at that list, I realize
you already have it.
I've had those the whole time, right? I've had them the entire time. And that is an experience that I had to go through to be able to arrive to this realization that money does nothing for my happiness. It is simply a tool that allows me, in my opinion now, and this is my why, to increase my capacity to serve other people. Because that is really, when you water down what really makes me happy, that's what it is, right? Is my kids, my family, paying off some of my dad's student loans, right? And mind you, these are all things, these are all motions of service that you don't necessarily need money for. You could do it other ways, but I do understand and I empathize to the entrepreneur that's just trying to make ends meet. It's hard to see that. It's hard to see that in that moment. But I promise you, like, when you can get to a point where you realize that everything to make you happy is well within your control, like, life becomes that much more fulfilling and that much more blessed. So that's
that was beautifully said. I think that what people get wrong or they forget about is that if you're not going to be happy along the way or along the journey or along in the struggle, you find your own level of happiness in the struggle. If you can't do that, then when you have the thing that you've been trying to get, it's not about having the things, it's about getting the things. And I don't mean things as in like material things. It's like, I want this goal. Getting it is actually the joy. Like, that is actually the joy. And it's hard to put that into like really true perspective, but once you have it, the novelty wears off of it. So if you're not going to be happy in the middle of the fire, then you're not going to be happy when when the days are better. And I have found that to be profoundly, I mean, I'm talking to somebody you're the level that you're at, and like, I'm saying success in air quotes, the level that you're at is far beyond where I'm at. You know what I mean? Like, I have a just over $1 million net worth. Like, I just hit that level. I'm 34. It's not like I'm like setting the world on fire, but I'm thinking like I am happy in doing what I'm doing every day, and like, by the way, it's a lot easier to turn $1 million into $2 million than it is from 0 to $1 million. So like, this is all it's all going in the right direction. Right. But are you enjoying the process of what you do every single day? And I found that the real estate and entrepreneurial community, there are so many people that are so connected to that spirit, whatever it is, like, of trying to be happy. I've had a conversation with people that are really unhappy, that are multi-millionaires or billionaires. And I'm trying to bridge the gap, because it's like, I don't want to chase this thing forever for me to not be happy in the end. So I think, not to throw my whole spiel on this, but I do think that you have to figure out a way to define your own level of success, whatever that is. And if I'm comparing myself to you in the checks in the bank account, I'm going to have a rough time figuring out if I'm happy. But if I'm just comparing myself to previous me, I think that's what most people should do, to be honest. I think they should. And you've come such a long way. Like, how cool to like, have you ever taken a second to just look back and be like, this is pretty sick. I mean, it's rhetorical, maybe. Have you looked back and been like, this is all, because I know there's another goal in front of you, regardless.
I do it all the time. And I think you do get to a certain point where you kind of look up and you realize, like, this is not my own, right? Like, that's been the realization for me, is like, I look up and I see the operation that Elkridge Investments is, and I'm like, I'm not nearly smart enough to have thought about this all from nothing. But there's a lot of people, a lot of experiences, a lot of things that have happened as I've just been focused on the one thing, the next thing, right? That you start to really accumulate, and you look back and, it's been something real special. And that's the feeling I get oftentimes when I do sit in that moment, which is, this is not my own. It's taken a lot of people to get here. And because of that, I need to continue to give back.
Well, I hope that you had some of that moment during this podcast, because I don't know how long it's been since I have, and I try to do it, but even if you just had it for a brief moment, I hope you got to realize how far you've come. I think it's so cool, man. So I want to thank you for coming on. This has been really fun. The purpose of this podcast is to inspire others to realize that, you can achieve the things that you want to do if you hear it from people that maybe look and sound like you and come from similar backgrounds. And that's why we just interview everyone. So if people want to learn more about you, they want to network, they want to potentially partner with you in your business, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
My Instagram would be the easiest. So lamed.kinikini on Instagram. I'm active in my own DMs every day, and so people that reach out to me, like you're not getting a bot, it's actually me. And I think that's how we met, right?
Yeah,
And
it was.
so yeah, I would love to love to get connected with anybody, and I'm happy to see how I can help. So
Love it, man. I appreciate your time today. This has been so cool. Thanks for coming on and sharing your story, and I'm inspired for the rest of my day. So thanks.
hey, thanks for having me, Corey.